How do you go from this to this in your Minecraft world? Let's find out in today's episode of How to Build a Minecraft City. One of the critiques that I've gotten over the years that stuck with me was that in earlier versions of New Isle, those up to version 1.2, Old Town was right smack dab next to my downtown area. One commenter, I think it was on my Planet Minecraft page, said something to the tune of, "It's so unrealistic. Why is there a little European village next to this modern downtown with skyscrapers?" That commenter really had their jimmies in a rustle over this one neighborhood. I did eventually move Old Town when working on the latest version, version 1.3, but not because of what they said. I just wanted to give that area an update regardless. And joke's on them, there were actually two old-timey neighborhoods next to that modern downtown with skyscrapers. Somehow, Ravencroft didn't cause such a fuss. They were right in the sense that it was a little European village next to comparatively very modern architecture, however, and by exploring that part of New Isle, it would have been jarring for the player to step into that part of the city. But that's the aesthetic I was going for at the time when building it. Old Town started off with the goal of constructing a very different looking part of the city of New Isle, and it absolutely was. By that point, this was back in 2011, I had been sharing my world saves on Reddit and began interacting with the Minecraft community. I was seeing what other people were building, and I had a vision of what I wanted to build in that particular section of the city. As the name of the neighborhood implies, it was meant to be old looking and unique from the rest of the city, with the builds all being constructed from white wool and using oak wood. I wanted the lore to suggest that it was an old historic part of town which had been built long before skyscrapers had sprung up around it. An old-timey New Isle, if you will. Getting back to the topic of today's episode, I'm sure that by now you've already considered where you're going to build and start your city off, especially if you watched episode 1. Now, the next big question is, when are you going to build it? You might think that's a dumb question because if you're watching the series, it means you want to build a city right now, or perhaps you're already working on one as we speak. But what I mean by this question is, what era or point in time in history do you want your builds to take place in? Which is why I started off this episode by bringing up the topic of Old Town. Old Town was out of place, but it's because I wanted it to be. Consider this. Your Minecraft city is going to be telling a story in a way, as it's going to take place somewhere and at some point in time. It can take place whenever you, as its creator, want it to. Your city can stick to one era, or it can be a mix of several. You can build certain places or areas you've seen in the real world, or even try to make a recreation of entire cities, if you're that ambitious. Or you can make something completely 100% original. As all fans of the game are aware, the beauty of Minecraft is that you can really build whatever your imagination comes up with because there are just so many blocks and biomes to work with nowadays. The choice of what you want to build really is yours, whether you're working on it solo, like I've been doing, or with a building team, or on a server. Just remember, there's no wrong choice. It's your project and your creation at the end of the day. Just have fun with it. If you end up sharing it with other players, sometimes you'll get valid critiques, and sometimes you won't. You choose what to do with the feedback anyway. I do think, though, that picking a timeline you like, or a few, for your city will do a lot to keep you going, keep you motivated, and keep you on track. Consider sticking to a theme or plan, like building a medieval city, where you could use materials such as cobblestone, stone, various types of wood. You could introduce castles, stables, marketplaces, and tight old world streets, for instance. That whole era spanned about 1,000 years, and many countries and areas around the world were settled at the time of the medieval age, so there are many real-world places you could take a look into to get started on your own city build. It's a fascinating and architecturally beautiful era, which is why that particular period of time inspires so many Minecraft builds, including a few of my earliest ones. Another example of a time period you could set your city to is the Industrial Age. How about something like late 19th century Chicago, a time when the world's first skyscraper, the 42-meter tall home insurance building, was built? Maybe your city could start off in the 19th and 20th centuries and gradually add more modern elements. I personally lived in Toronto for most of my life, a city which had its first real boom in the early to mid 20th century, and currently has an obsession with glass and repeating the same buildings over and over again. I've also visited and really enjoyed spending time in cities like New York and Montreal, which have a lot more history and charm. Sadly, I've never gotten the chance to go to Chicago, but as an architecture nerd, I'd love to go. Even without having been there myself, its style really drew me in, and it's one I took a lot of inspiration from. The cities I just named off were all my inspiration for the city of New Isle in one way or another, whether I've been to them or not. And real-world places such as those are a great way of planning your own Minecraft city. Thanks to the internet, you don't even have to get to them using your own 2 feet. You've got Google Street View, image searches, photography forums or subreddits, and a ton of other ways of getting your creative juices flowing if you want to make something resembling your list of inspirational places. I'll leave a few of my favorite resources in the video description. Now here's something not to do in your Minecraft city. Forget to consider the scale. My city isn't one-to-one, which means it isn't built to the scale of the real world. For instance, if you consider each block in Minecraft to be 1 meter tall, then my builds are pretty short. A skyscraper is typically defined as being at least 150 meters tall, so despite having some pretty dense skylines in the two cities in my world, I only have one skyscraper in the true sense. Why is that though? Well, building one-to-one is very challenging and limited by the way the game is designed. At the time of making this video, the height limit in the game world is 319 blocks, and that's if you use a flat world. You have an even shorter height limit when building in a natural world, depending on where it is in your terrain that you build. That means if you want to build, say, the Empire State Building, which is 443 meters tall, the CN Tower, which is 553 meters tall, or the Burj Khalifa, for instance, which is 830 meters tall, well, you just can't do that. You're going to have to adjust your scale and build smaller. If you were to build any of those buildings or anything inspired by them, even on a 1:3 scale, which is doable and means they'll be 1/3 of their real world height, consider how much detail you'll want. In New Isle, I personally furnish the interior of every single build I make, but I don't think I would do that if I built every building in my world to a 1:1 scale. To put it bluntly, ain't nobody got time nor the patience for that. I certainly don't. Not as a solo builder anyway. So keep in mind that the bigger, taller, and more ambitious you go, the more time your build will take. And if you want your city to cover a lot of ground and sprawl out, you may want to make some compromises here and there so that it actually can grow at a decent pace. Another thing to take into consideration are your roads. Please, for the love of all that is blocky, figure out how wide you want your roads and sidewalks to be at the very beginning of your city build and stick to a standard size. One of the things I really regret in New Isle is not making them wider or leaving room for things like trees and benches, as well as generally having more space to place details on the sidewalks. I recommend a minimum of 3 blocks for each lane on your road and to make wider roads depending on where you're building. In your downtown area, you'll want wider roads, for instance, to mimic what you might find in a real big city's downtown. And the sidewalks can be as wide as you want them to be if you want to make sure your pedestrian experience is pretty solid. I'd recommend doing that before it's too late. I spent quite a bit of time widening my streets as New Isle got bigger over the years, but they're still not quite as wide as I'd like them to be because I have the integrated metro system or certain buildings that made it challenging or outright impossible to move things around. My excuse is that I started out building in the alpha days, but that's meant I've had to stick close to my earlier sizing standards because the rest of the map would look too different if I suddenly started making gigantic roads everywhere when I didn't have them before. Standards do matter if you want to make a world that's aesthetically pleasing and somewhat realistic. Lastly, to help with things like placing those aforementioned roads or flattening or raising terrain, consider using editing tools. They really speed up the process and make quick work of the more tedious aspects of building your city. I personally used World Painter to make some of the scenery, such as the mountains, and Amulet Editor for quite a lot else, such as duplicating roads or subway titles, or preparing my terrain for new areas. I'll link to both of those in the description below as they really are lifesavers and tools that get my personal seal of approval. And that's it for today, but I do want to know, what era have you chosen for your Minecraft city build? Will you build something based on the real world or something driven purely by your imagination? And what words of wisdom do you have for all the would-be virtual urban planners out there? All builds have their own history, their own story, so be sure to let me know yours in the comments. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of How to Build a Minecraft City. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel as it'll mean more viewers like you will get a chance to see my content. If you leave a comment, I try to get to all of them if I can. And if you want to check out the city of New Isle for yourself, the download link is in the description below. See you next time, city builders.